Hello, my name is Lisa Ross, though you may know me better as Paper Daisy Creations, and today I'm excited to share with you my Socks of the Secret Garden collection. This 4-pattern collection features 4 designs all inspired by the book, The Secret Garden. This one is worked from the toe up and uses increases and decreases to create this lattice work throughout the sock, and you'll see these little flower bud stitches. And they're not hard to work, but they may be something you haven't encountered yet in your knitting. So I'm going to guide you through how to make these cute little flower buds. All right, so let's get started. Now, a lot of knitters will ask me how I knit my socks, and I actually usually use 9-inch circulars to work the sock. But I moved it onto DPNs because I feel like this is easier for you to see. I'm very comfortable using DPNs, magic loop method, or 9-inch circulars. The only thing that I am not talented at is 2 circulars because I always end up magic looping them. Now, we're going to be working the flower bud stitch on this center purl. So if you'll see here, we have these knit stitches that go one to the right, one to the left, and they're paired with these yarn over increases, giving it that little bit of lacy effect right there. And we want to work our flower bud on the center purl stitch. So you'll see that it comes straight up from between this lattice work right here. That purl stitch just lines straight up. And there are 2 purls on either side of it. So I have these 2 purls, and that center one is where I'm going to be working my flower bud. And it really helps if you can visualize it to sort of read your knitting, because that way you can plow along through this design without needing the aid of a chart or your written instructions. So to get there, I'm going to knit this one, and then I'm going to purl 2. And now I'm ready to work my flower bud stitch. Now this is going to be a little bit difficult to see just because of the size of this fingering weight yarn. But right here, I'm going to use this crochet hook to point it out to you. Right here is the current stitch that's on the needles. And you can see this little purl bump. That purl bump is at the top of one stitch, which is right here. And then there's another purl bump, which is the top of the second stitch, which is right here. And if I pull this down, maybe you can see it a little bit better. So I have the stitch on the needles, then I've got one hole right here, that was a stitch, and one hole right here. So 2 stitches down. And I'm going to try and show that to you again. So the stitch on the needle is right here. Let's see if I can do it left-handed. I have, so stitch on the needle, then right here I have one hole just under the purl bump, and right here is another hole just under the purl bump. And if I went down one more hole, I would see the one that goes between these 2 yarn overs, and that's too far. So I'm going down into the second hole below the stitch that's on the needle. Okay, so in this hole, this second stitch below the needle, below the stitch that's on the needle, so from here, 1, 2, I'm going to go into this stitch and I'm going to knit or draw up a loop. So I've worked a knit. Now, I don't want to keep it really close to the work. I want to stretch it out a little. And what that does is it's going to make a nice long loop that's going to reach up and match the length of the other stitches that are currently on the needles. So basically, it needs to be the length of those 2 stitches that it's replacing. All right, so let me show you that one more time. I'm going into that stitch. And whether you're right-handed or left-handed, you're going to do it just as if you were knitting this stitch. So I'm going in and knitting that stitch. Pull it up, make a nice lengthy loop, and then I'm going to yarn over. Again, however you yarn over for your knitting style, you can yarn over however you do it for your knitting style, you just need to have that yarn over because that's going to give you the extra stitch right there. And then I go into that same hole one more time. And what I like to do is use my right finger to hold those stitches on the needle. So I've got, this one was knit into the stitch, this was my yarn over. Now I go back into that hole and I knit one more stitch. And that right there is a knit, yarn over, knit, or a KYOK, knit, yarn over, knit. And it's all into that second stitch down. Now, I don't need this stitch that's on the needle. I'm going to drop this stitch and those 2 stitches right there are going to unravel. They're not needed for this because I've already locked it in place with my knit, yarn over, knit that goes below that stitch. So I take that stitch off the left needle. You don't need to do anything to it when you block your socks. It will even out all the tensions. And I can move on to the next stitch. So I've got knit, yarn over, knit. I made sure that I did not pull it too tightly down here. I want to have a little bit of length to create that flower bud. And I'm going to work over to the next spot. So I do my purl stitches, knit, purl, knit, 2 purls here. All right, I double check to make sure I'm on that central purl line of stitches. And it's really easy to see if you can line it up with those yarn overs that are down below. You've got this central line of purl stitches right here. Here's the one that's on the needle. I'm going to go into the 1, 2 second hole that is below the stitch that's currently on the needle. So it's below that second purl bump, and I'm going to explain it. I go into that stitch, I draw up a loop. So this is just like you're knitting that stitch. So however you would knit that stitch, whether it's left-handed or right-handed, that's how you're going to draw up your loop. You're going to work your yarn over, and you're going to go in and knit that stitch one more time, making sure that those 3 loops, the knit, yarn over, knit, are all about the same length right next to one another. And then you can drop the stitch that you did not work that's right above that. And that's just going to even out. Let me show you this one more time. So let me work over to the next one, which for this one is going to be right on the side of my double pointed needle, which is fine. You can totally do it at any point. Okay, so I'm ready to work my flower bud. I've got the purl stitch. I make sure that it's my central purl stitch. I checked this with every single flower bud that I made. I just did a visual scan quickly to make sure that I'm making this flower bud in the right spot. You would not want these to be off center. It would not look right. I'm not going into the next stitch. I go 1, 2 spaces down. So 2 stitches down from that needle. It's still in that same line of purl stitches. I work a knit, yarn over, knit, a little bit trickier with the positioning of these DPNs. I make sure that it's plenty lengthy, and I drop that stitch off the needle. So I'm going to go ahead and work the rest of this round. I'll get it back to the beginning, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so here I am back at the beginning of the round, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. Now, keep in mind, you've just added a lot of stitches because you worked 3 stitches where there had once been 1. So your stitch count is going to be different on that row that you just finished and on the round that we are doing right now. So what I have are these little clusters of 3 stitches, the knit, yarn over, knit, coming out of that lower purl stitch. So you can see here's the purl stitch. Here are the stitches that are coming out of it, these 3 stitches, and they cluster together because they're all coming out of one stitch. And so I've got those all across the row. So those 3 stitches that I just created, I'm going to just knit those. So here are those. The round actually began with the knit, yarn over, knit. So I knit those 3 stitches. And then I continue working all the other stitches in pattern. So purl the purls, knit the knits. And when you get back to that knit, yarn over, knit, you're just knitting those stitches across. So this is the easiest part of the stitch. You're just working in pattern. I'm going to go ahead and get to the end of this round, and then I'll show you how we finish it up. Okay, so I'm back at the beginning, and I want to show you what this round looks like. So as you can see, coming out of that purl stitch that's just above that central purl line, I have my 3 stitches, that knit, yarn over, knit, and then right here they were just knit right above. So I've got the increase from 1 to 3, and then you see those 3 stitches just knit above. And what we're going to do now is close them off at the top to complete these little buds. And so in order to do that, I'm going to work a central double decrease. A central double decrease is pretty standard in lace knitting, so there's a good chance you've done this before, but if not, I'm going to show you what to do. So we want to take the first 2 stitches that are on the needle. So here's my flower bud. I've got these 3 stitches. I double check to make sure I'm working with the correct stitches. And now I'm going to slip 2 stitches together knitwise. And what that means is I'm going into the stitches as if I'm going to knit them 2 together. As if I'm working a knit 2 together, go into those stitches, slip them off the needle. And that changes the positioning of those stitches by doing it this way. So you slip those 2 together without knitting them. You knit the next stitch, which was our 3rd stitch in this flower bud. And then you need to lift those 2 slipped stitches over the knit stitch. For some people, it's easier to do it one at a time. Some people do it both at once. And that is going to be the way that I do it, is I just scoop them both up at the same time and lift them over that knit stitch, but it is totally fine to just lift them one at a time off of that stitch, and that's going to complete our flower bud. So let me get over to the next one and I'll show you that again. All right, so here are my stitches. This was the knit, yarn over, knit. Then I knit those 3 stitches. I'm going to slip 2 together knitwise off the needle. Make sure you don't get any split strands. Knit this stitch and then pass those 2 slip stitches over. And this time I'll just pass them one at a time so you can see what that looks like. So I lift 1 over and I lift 2 over. And there is my completed flower bud. And when I come back around to this stitch, I'm going to purl the top of it. And that's just going to continue the background of my lattice work right here. So let me do that one more time so you can see that central double decrease. This returns the stitch count to its original numbers. Follow the pattern for all of the stitch counts for your size. So slip 2 together knitwise, knit 1, and then pass those 2 slip stitches over. And it may look a little bit wonky, especially on your first few as you get the hang of this, but a lot of that's going to even out with blocking. And at the end, you're going to have your beautiful sock with tiny little flower buds and beautiful lattice work all the way over. Be sure to check out my Socks of the Secret Garden, available both on paperdaisycreations.com and on Ravelry.com. And I wish you all very happy knitting.